Sometimes you look at a person and think they've got it all sorted, but behind the scenes, things are actually different. They're falling apart. It's funny, isn't it, how more successful we get, the better we become at hiding the fact that everything is running on empty. I'm sitting down with Hannah Dalby today to look at why we keep hitting these same walls in our relationships, even when we've done all the work. Welcome back to the Champion Mindset Collective podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Dyer. Grateful that you're here watching or listening to this episode. Today, we're having a conversation about something that does not get talked about enough. We see a lot of people who are doing really good on the outside. They have the career and the success, but when they get away from the office, they're actually pretty worn out. Maybe you feel like you're doing all the right things, but you keep hitting the wall. You've tried the mindset tools and the coaching, you've done the therapy, but you still end up with the same arguments at home and feeling like something is just missing. Hannah Dalby is here with me today. Hannah helps people look at what's actually going on under the surface. We're going to talk about why these old patterns keep coming back and how to finally stop the cycle. Hannah runs a practice called The Jungle on the Sunshine Coast. She spends her time with high-performing men and women who have built successful careers, businesses, or athletic careers and look like they have it all sorted on the outside. But behind the scenes, things feel a bit empty and disconnected. Hannah has lived this herself. She spent years as a professional Muay Thai fighter and a business owner. She was winning, but she was stuck in the cycle of burnout for nearly 10 years and could not find the exit. She knows what it feels like to be high achieving but totally drained. Today, she uses human integration protocol to help people get to the root of the problem and why they keep hitting the same walls again and again. She looks at how your body and your nervous system holds onto the old pattern with that regular talk therapy or coaching that can sometimes be a bit of a miss. It's actually about clearing the blocks so that you can stop having the same old arguments and finally find some peace. It's great to have you here today, Hannah. Welcome to the Champion Mindset Collective podcast.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I'm excited to be here.
Great to have you here. I've been looking forward to this conversation because your journey is quite inspiring, what you've done with not only Muay Thai, but you've learned other techniques of fighting and so on. Could you take us through a bit of a journey of your life in terms of how you transition into all these different martial arts practices? And yeah,
How old would you like me to start?
wherever you'd like to start.
Look, I was like always going to build an empire and run a business. I knew that. I think I started my first business when I was 8, knocking on doors, selling little things like bracelets with willow trees. When I was 13 or 14, I started a rave wear business, making these fat pants with, lights in them and stuff like that. And that was going to be the thing I was going to do forever. I was a high performing dancer. So as a little kid, I was, high achieving. I need to be the best. I like upgraded into the classes all of the time. And so everything I did, it was like I have to be the best, the absolute best at, whatever it was, whether it was dancing, whether it was running these businesses. Inside of that, I lost a partner to a car accident when I was about 18. So I was in the rave scene. Obviously, there's a lot of partying that goes on in there, drug taking, a lot of stuff like that. And that trauma specifically, I wasn't capable of processing that, and no one could teach me how to process that. And so I did what I knew how to do, and I pushed really hard, and I avoided everything in every way that I possibly could. At 18, I was door knocking as a job, and I got moved to the Sunshine Coast. They gave me my own office. I was, 18 and hiring these 30-year-olds, but I was a drug addict, and I didn't have that label to myself then. It was just what I did to survive and what I did to keep going. And I did really, really well at everything I ever tried. I ended up selling cars. I smashed it at that. I ended up becoming a trades assistant for carpenters, and I was just really, really good at everything that I did. But on the inside of that, I was completely disconnected from myself. I barely slept. I was on drugs all of the time. My only purpose in life was to make it look like I was winning. And I didn't necessarily completely win all the time, but as long as it looked like I was winning, I was pretty happy with that scenario. So, I bought my first house when I was 20 and renovated it, bought a second one when I was 24. But about 20 years old, it was just like a random I was at a fight show and some guy was standing next to me like, "Hey, I'm starting a fight gym on Monday. You should come." And I thought, "Oh, yeah, right. I can do something like that." And I went and I was like, "Okay, this is giving me everything I need." And I spent the next decade, not having a day off. And the beautiful thing about the fighting was it was another really good excuse to detach myself from the world, detach myself from relationships, because I now had this beautiful reason to be really, really busy. And the chemicals that fighting gives you is kind of like the same chemicals as drugs. So I now had this double whammy. I was like loaded up on dopamine and endorphins and serotonin. And I just didn't have to feel anything bad ever. I was doing both things. I lived this double life, this like really secret double life where during the day, I mean, I started a marketing company when I was about 24. And so I was doing that and training about 19 hours a week. And then at nighttime, hanging out with bikies and, going off to do all this crazy stuff and, taking a lot of drugs. And I nearly died like a few times in domestic violence situations because that was the secret life I was living at nighttime, is allowing myself to be involved with these types of people and having no ability to have connection at all. Like, so healthy love or healthy connection was so foreign that this was the answer in my relationships, which got very, very dangerous. And, I got shot at once and I was like, "Hey, I've got to get out. I've got to get out of this." And I didn't do it immediately, but I ended up meeting a guy who was kind of the same as me, had bought houses and built businesses, but was still kind of stuck in this world somehow. So we made a decision to get out together. I did it secretly by myself. No one knew anything other than I was being a little bit quieter in the business at the time. And then I rebranded my marketing business, went back to training. No one knew a single word. And I just made, this business, I made it grow really fast. And then I ended up professionally fighting, which, was fun. And there were so many parts of myself that I loved. Like, it was like I was able to be seen and be in the spotlight and all of these things that were really, really good. And my Instagram looked amazing. I was really fit and healthy. So then absolutely no one could possibly guess that I wasn't okay because it looked on the outside. And I think, there's a lot of reasons why I ended up giving it up. Sometimes I'm like, the universe kind of pulled it into me. I had no choice. There was definitely something a little magical going on behind the scenes, but I started a recovery center for the sake of my fighting. I wanted my own cryotherapy machine. So me and my dad started this business together and it did really well for its first couple of months. I was like, "We have made it. This is awesome." Put in a manager, went back to the gym, and the business was actually doing this and I was refusing to look at it. I was like, "No, no, 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 that can't be the case. That can't be the case." Like, I need to keep fighting. And so at the end of that year, I was actually got called into an ayahuasca ceremony. And inside of that, I got this big lesson or this imagery of like, well, your dad's invested all this money into this business. You've got a choice here. You either honor that and grow this thing, or you punch people in the face for the rest of your life as a living. And I was like, all right, well, sorry, dad. Like, that was my bad. I'll come back and I'll grow this business. So when I gave it up, I gave it up for that reason. And then I realized how many problems that I had because that space where there was no EK runs in the morning, no 5 hours of training at nighttime, I realized I had an eating disorder. I had severe body dysmorphia. I had all of this stuff underneath of me. I had no one around me, no deep connections at all. Like, once I lost my gym, that was it. I was by myself. And so there was some work to do. There was some serious work to do. And I understood that then. And over the next couple of years, I went on a very big journey of research and learning and understanding, and pulled myself out of it by doing very deep work and going against a lot of the mainstream stuff I had been taught. And at some point, I nearly shut down the business anyway, because there was even a place inside of the cryotherapy, which was I could just do this cold every single day and I don't have to feel anything. And so I nearly shut it down because I thought, well, I'm part of the problem. I'm just saying, "Oh, just do cold, just do sauna. You'll feel fine. Do it every day. You can do all the things." And it's still not true. It's like, yeah, it makes you feel good, but you're not dealing with why you're feeling shitty in the first place. And so I made a decision to pull all of this stuff that I now knew and now learned inside of the business. And we started running these programs for people using still the cool tech that we had, but teaching them how to train in a way that's not excessive, teaching them how to eat enough food and the right food, and then dealing with this
Yeah.
really deep emotional stuff. And magic started happening. And that's progressed and progressed over the last few years into something that is, I think, truly incredible.
Nice. Wow. What a journey you've had. My goodness, I can't even imagine what it'd be like. Wow, you've done amazing. You were definitely heading towards a point of no return, and then you pulled yourself back to then grow your business to where you are. And, like what you said, you were looking at everything external to help yourself.
Yeah.
You're getting all that, the right feelings and things from the outside, but internally, there was still something that wasn't right.
There was a
Yeah.
lot that wasn't right.
Yeah, there was. You've spent a decade in this cycle and then you're pushing hard and burning out every few months. So I'd love to start here. What was the constant cycle that actually was costing you back then?
The biggest thing was relationships. So I had no depth and no connection in my relationships. Like I
Mm,
people kind of there, but no one really knew who I was. I didn't really have intimacy in any way. I kept everyone at an arm's length without really realizing it. And I knew, but I didn't know. I didn't want to look at that. There was just no depth around me. And I was avoiding even looking at that fact by I have to train, I have to get to this, I have to do that. It's really important. And I thought that's what I wanted. And it was the cycle around that's really interesting because it's like, well, as soon as I feel any kind of loneliness or lack of intimacy or lack of connection, run, train, do the next thing. So I couldn't ever quite feel it. And so there was obviously something wrong. I just wasn't even willing to look.
mm,
So that was probably the biggest thing. The other thing it cost me was any kind of real growth because I would get somewhere and then fall and then get somewhere and then fall. And it was like, why am I on this roller coaster? Why can't I actually get there? Why aren't I hitting the place that I've always known that I could reach? I couldn't comprehend why it wasn't happening.
yeah. So you're searching for that next high, keep going for that high, but then you knew that it was going to come back down again.
It always
Yeah. It always did, and it always does, right? You made the choice to get out of that. Now, was there a specific moment in that life that you were living that where you realized that you couldn't keep going like this, and you had to make a change?
You know, I get asked that question a lot, and I don't think it was a very specific moment. I think it was a slow unraveling because what happened
So
when
there's a whole lot of different moments.
yeah,
Yeah.
because what happened when I gave it up, I didn't want to give it up, but I knew that there was something inside of me that said, "No, choose the business." And when I gave up fighting and I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna do this," it was very, very uncomfortable because there's identities that were being left. And so I didn't really want to make this choice except that I had committed to it and I was like, "Just keep trusting that you're gonna walk down this direction and it'll be okay." But I was losing the identity of the hustler, the really fit athlete, the fighter. There was all of these identities that were being crushed. I mean, I put on a lot of weight very quickly because I'd been starved and overtrained for a very long time. I didn't want to leave the house. I was like, how do I got to go back. I got to go back. I was told by someone like, you're basically banned from cardio for 12 months. You've got to let your body heal from all of that as well. And so there was so many parts of me that didn't really want to stop this. And I think that like over time in real life, like lots and lots and lots of work and little layers of it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be in this moment right now. It's okay to have put on some weight. It's okay to be slow for a while. And I would pendulate between the things because it was still old patterns running. I would get some awareness and then I'd pendulate back and I was fighting myself for a long time around like what, like this can't be it. And it was just identity falling apart.
Yeah, and letting go of the identity that you held on for so long, it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. And you can't shift into a new version of yourself holding on to the old ways of being. What was your mindset like back then when you were going through that? Where you said you had to pause, you had to slow down, you had to heal. What was your mindset at that point in time?
Not great. There was like probably a few months of feeling depressed and hopeless and like, how am I ever gonna come out of this? Where is everyone? Do I matter anymore? What am I worth? Because the worthiness is also tied to all of that success.
Mm,
Like and I'd fight a lot. Like I was like endlessly in the ring, in the ring, in the ring because but that moment between that fight being done and then not another one being booked is like I'm worthless now because I don't have this fight coming up or this fight that's about to happen or the people would care about the win for a week and then it was now what? Now you're old news, and I needed to keep chasing that thing. So not having that, like, what am I worth? So it wasn't great.
Yeah, self-worth, self-doubt.
Yeah.
There would have been lots of different things popping up for you at the time. Now, a lot of people listening to this, are self-aware, and that they've probably tried therapy or coaching, and they're totally different, right? And therapy is different from coaching, but yet they still find themselves kind of repeating the same old patterns, right? And so, why do you think that insight alone is not enough to stop the cycle?
There's 2 things that are happening in here. Coaching specifically does a lot of telling you what you need to do next.
Hmm.
And when we have parts of ourselves that are resistant, that are, stubborn little teenagers, that are children that want to do it their own way, these parts surface all along the way. And so when you haven't made that choice from your own internal, like, you can do it for a while and then go, well, screw you. I don't want to do that. And why should I listen to you? And I don't know if that's going to work. And, like, why should, and so it's not your own truth. And when you're just listening to external stuff, you always fall apart because you're doing it from force rather than from a aligned knowing of this is the right thing for me. And
Mm,
therapy, in a sense, there's lots of things wrong, I think, with talk therapy. I think sometimes it can be more traumatizing because you bring all the stuff up. Now you've got all the feelings there and you've got nothing to do with it. Like, how do you process
mm,
this? There's a lot of projection that happens inside of talk therapy where it's not taught enough inside of therapists themselves to be able to hold transference and counter transference. And so people start projecting stuff into the room, and then they get resistant to it or they have judgment around it, and that goes into the room. So now it's not safe, and you're getting a re-traumatization pattern. So it can often make things worse. You have all this awareness, and then you think you should be fixed because you understand why, but your nervous system is actually still holding on to the patterns and the stories and the trauma, which you then think, well, hang on, I've learned all this stuff. Why aren't I different? And then you feel even worse about yourself.
'cause you're still holding on to it, right? As Dr. Gabor Mate says, the situation was traumatic, but if you keep holding on to it, that's the trauma that you're creating, and you're creating your own suffering by just talking through it over and over and over again.
Yes.
It's crazy. And, who wants to spend, you know, months, if not years, talking about the same thing over and over again, right? For me, it'd be like, okay, I've got awareness. Now I got to take action. Let's move forward, right? And so, but that's how I approach my life anyway. It's like, okay, I've got the awareness now. I can see the pattern appearing, and it's time for me to move forward.
Yeah.
Yes. Uh, um, Tell us a little bit about your the principle that you use, the framework that you use.
Well, it's really interesting that you say that, because I think one of the problems that happens in a lot of healing spaces is this attempt to transcend to higher consciousness and to manifest from these higher vibrations and all that kind of stuff. And you're then transcending and excluding all needs and things below hand. So, one of the frameworks
Mm,
that this is built on is spiral dynamics, which is we've kind of got
mm,
developmental needs, right? And
yes.
but we need to transcend and include those needs rather than transcend and ignore those needs. So one of the things that
We're integrating.
for integrating,
We're
yeah.
integrating.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the most important one, I believe, like, we can transcend up to these higher states of consciousness where we can, you know, feel higher powers come through us, be able to understand that we're all one and that I am you and you are me and all of these beautiful things. And there's a field that we can work in. All of those things are true, but you need structure, order, and discipline, or you're just off with the fairies. And the same is true for if you're only structure, order, and discipline, which is what I was, but you don't have access to these other parts of yourself or to transcend, then you're just in this rut banging your head against a wall. And so
Mm,
we're looking at, do you have a basic sense of safety in your system? Do you have a tribe where you're actually seen, heard, understood, and belong for exactly who you are? Or can you not let that out amongst your tribe? And do you need a different one? And is that scary? And do you have a sense of ego that is actually healthy? Sometimes the thing that someone needs the most is a healthy dose of their own ego.
yeah.
And then this structure and order and discipline, because we need to take action on the things that we understand about ourselves. I could understand all day long that if I just go start running to clear my system and to let go of some cortisol, I'll be fine. But if I don't do it, then what the hell's the point? I can just stay here,
Mm,
the source, and oh yes, this is true, and I can feel what are you doing with that? And how can you actually be of service with that?
yeah. Yeah. Agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
the other model that I use is masculine feminine integration.
Yeah.
So there is
Yep.
all dark masculine, dark feminine, light feminine, dark feminine, and bringing all those parts of yourself online and not making any of them wrong. And when those parts are in shadow, they will come out in leaky ways anyway, trying to get the thing that they need.
Mm.
So it's actually bringing all of this into consciousness and into the light of things where you can make conscious choice. So very often people won't do their life that much differently. They'll just come from a conscious place rather than from a shadow place, and then everything shifts.
Yeah, and knowing when to step into your masculine or feminine divine and be
Yeah,
able to ho create the container to be able to hold that, not only for yourself, but also for your partner
yeah.
as well in a relationship. Or they feel safe in that container as well.
Well,
Yeah,
you need a regulated nervous system. Like we survive in co-regulation, and you can't expect one person to do all the regulation for the relationship. Like you have to rock up with a little bit of your own self-regulation first, and now you actually have co-regulation, not just leaning on
yeah,
someone else's nervous system.
yeah. And it's interesting because, like, and especially in the last, I mean, I don't know how many years women have actually been like in leadership, but you'll have women CEOs and managers. When they go home, they just want to be in their feminine
It's
space, right?
that. Yeah.
And if the male can't step into his masculine divine and be the man, then she's also got to be the masculine in her life as well. Yeah, it's about really understanding each other and where you've got to step in. And it's a dance. It's a dance.
It
It's
is a dance.
clarity.
It is. I
Yeah,
mean, it's one of the things I said to my partner when we got together was, "I'm running a company, so when I finish, I wanna make no decisions, I wanna do absolutely nothing, I need you to actually step up and it's just because I'm doing this thing," and it was an agreement that we made of, "Okay."
yeah,
And there's times where he needs to fall apart too, and I've just gotta step up for that moment, and that's okay.
100%, absolutely. Yeah. So why do you think that high performers are so good at hiding their pain from the world?
Because the performance becomes the thing that they use to escape, and because a it's an accepted form of escape. It looks so good on paper, and, you know, it comes from lots of different things. It's like, I was only loved if I was winning, you know, I was only accepted if I was achieving these things, and, you know, there's lots of different like ADHD people will have a higher rate of getting into this position because they need lots of stimulation. And there's lots of different reasons of why someone would end up pushing into this high performance kind of state. It's just so good at escaping without it looking bad. And you end up in control all of the time. You can push and force and control this and, you know, have all of these things in place. You don't necessarily need to have presence with that. You can be in active doing. And
Mm,
relationships require presence, which means turning off the brain and coming back into the body, which is very difficult when you're having to use that mental function all the time to perform, get it done, get it done, get it done. I mean, I even still have days where it's like, hang on, like turn that off, back to the body. I'm actually here.
yeah. Yeah, because and that comes back down to the regulation, right? Being able to self-regulate and be able to and your body knows and your body keeps score of everything that's going on.
It does.
So it's so important to like you said, come back to your body. Your brain tends to, as I learned in my coaching days, was your brain deletes, distorts, and generalizes information, which is why if you have an argument, you can never remember the whole full argument. You can only remember bits and pieces of it. And then you're fumbling your way through explaining it to someone. So yeah, it's so important to come back to your body and just pause. I think you're pausing and just reflecting on what's happening and then coming to the awareness is important.
The other thing that's actually happening inside of that with the arguments is it'll be wounded parts of you that are coming online to have the fight,
Uh-huh,
protector parts.
uh-huh,
And then you come
uh-huh.
out of those protector parts and a new part is coming on. So this part of you wasn't even there.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, exactly. So we're projecting the old parts that are still not dealt with and still not felt through. Yeah. Wow, it could just be another episode about this.
Well, 'cause it's fragmentation, right? It's fragmentation when you have a little trauma,
Yeah,
you get fragmented parts, and one part is there to keep you safe from this, and one part actually has the desire, and it happens endlessly through your life. You've got all these parts floating around that all come online at different times when they feel necessary, and the thing that feels the most dangerous, not is the most dangerous. that's the part that will come online to protect you from that, even though it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, 100%. And does having more information or more tools actually make it harder to change?
Look, I think so, and I think especially for high performers because they will use it as another thing they have to just get done. So it's like,
Mm,
like I've experienced it with lots of different things. Oh, well, I'll do the meditation, I'll do the breath work, I'll get in the cold. And as long as I was doing all of those things, it's like, okay, well, I've got a 2-hour morning routine now,
checklist.
checklist.
Yeah,
And then you start feeling shit when you don't do it. You're like, "Oh, I haven't done all of my things." And you just back in your brain like do 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 do. And the other side of that looks like, "Oh, my body is in need of this right now. This is the thing that is actually required. This is what's needed for me in this moment." And it's far more flowy than this like discipline and structure, yes, a balance between like what is good for me and can I have some structure and order.
yeah. So it's actually you got to do the be well, not the do, but be the being first,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then do, and
Yeah.
then you'll have what you're looking for. So most people are just going for the do and the have
Yeah. Can I have
instead of
I've
being.
had my 19 supplements, I've done my sauna, I've done my cryo, I've done my cold plunge, and now I've done my journaling, and now I've done this, and now I've done that. Why don't I feel good? Well, you spent 2 hours, like, forcing yourself through all of these things.
Yeah, exactly. It's when you talk through this and actually think about it, it's actually it makes a lot of sense. You often see that the first place that this inner burnout shows up is in our closest relationships. So why do our relationships tend to take a big hit when we're struggling under the surface?
Well, it's because relationships need a regulated nervous system. They're not something that can be performed or controlled. Like you can't perform a relationship with someone because it's no longer a relationship, it's this performance and that doesn't feel like connection. It doesn't feel like intimacy. You actually need to have a regulated nervous system to be present with someone which feels like connection. And when you're talking about an actual relationship, like imagine for a second that you're on the other side of that and someone comes home and they're dysregulated and they're focused on work and they're stressed about the things and they're like, "Oh yes, let's go out for dinner." And they're like their mind's not they're not even with you. They're like off on this other thing and you're like, "What well, this doesn't feel like you care or can see me or that you like it doesn't feel very good." And so then that other person can no longer receive your love because you're not actually giving it. And then there's no
Mm,
reciprocation for that love. There's no gratitude or appreciation because it's not real. And then that has a flow on effect where you no longer feel like you're seen, heard, appreciated, or loved because it's not actually being given in an authentic way. And so then you feel even more disconnected and then you just go back to your work and avoid this thing that's not making you feel very good from over here rather than looking at this is not okay. We need to come back to a state of regulation and presence for a relationship to work. And the rest of the things that are going on in our world, we can perform it. We can show up for our clients, we can show up for the meetings, we can show up for the emails. We can do that from a place of dysregulation with performance.
yeah. What about if the other person is not being is actually unable to communicate how they're feeling about things and kind of like just sort of they back off, right? What happens in that kind of scenario?
Well, it's the same thing the other way, right? Now, they actually have a dysregulated nervous system. They don't feel safe to express their needs. They don't feel safe
Mm,
to express their truth. So the same thing is happening on that side. That will come from a wound where it wasn't safe to express their truth, where love has felt unsafe or it's been dangerous before, where communicating their truth hasn't been allowed, being a good girl or a good boy, or shove it down, please stay in your box, please stay in your corner. And so that has nothing to do with communication tools or the skills of communication. It's do I feel safe enough to express? Now, this can collapse with the other person becoming safe enough. And I see this in a dynamic where you've got the feminine or the woman can't communicate, so those skills aren't there, but he becomes so regulated and so safe that all of the neuroticism can come out and it can be chaotic and messy and he can just go, okay. And then at the end of that, when there's no one has left, so if he hasn't left and has stayed present through all of that bullshit will collapse, and then truth starts to come out because you haven't left me in all of the chaos. You haven't left me when I've been the worst of myself. Sometimes that can happen. Not always. It will often take
mm,
the other person to do that work as well.
yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So, why does this show up in most intimate connections before it shows up in business?
Well, because they're gonna trigger us the most. You know, our
Because
we're
we're
close.
closest to them.
Yeah, we're closest
Mm.
to them, and they're gonna, and often we attract partners on purpose that meet our wounds, that are there for our healing, that are there to bring up the parts of ourselves that need to be shown so we can undo it. It for sure happens in business as well. I mean, I've just gone through a thing in the last couple of weeks with one of my staff, realizing that I've got this really bad rescuing pattern, and then it would play out in that I would rescue her until the point that I needed rescuing, and then I would go to my partner and go, "Well, now I need rescuing because I've overgiven over here." So it does play out in business. It just generally is more chaotic inside of a relationship because you trigger each other so much because they're so close.
Yeah, I've definitely over the years, I've definitely noticed that people come into your life for a reason, and it's a season as well. They're not meant to be there for you with you, and you level up, and like you're talking about transcending, and as you go up to the neck, your vibration starts to rise. You may disengage, and they may not be the right person for you for that time. And I've definitely, in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, I've been through this washing machine multiple times. And it's interesting because my current situation it's like, is this for a season or is this for, it definitely is for a reason, but it's like, it seems like to me that this is for a season as well. Previously, like for me personally, as a child, I felt abandoned because I was left in a boarding school in India for 6 years, which was like cross between army and prison. So for me, I had a lot of abandonment and rejection issues. And it played out in my personal relationships and my work relationships.
I do.
And then I can't put my hand on my heart and say everything's healed because you'll never get there. There's always something that's
Yeah.
going to crop up. But I would say I've done a lot of work and a lot of healing over the years where I used to be a very anxious person in relationships. I don't have that anymore. I'm like, "Eh, whatever. I'm just getting on. I'm just, you know, doing what I got to do. And just because the other thing is when you then start looking at like there's the personal side and then there's your business side or your professional side. And you might have dreams and goals. You might have massive dreams, but the other person might be like, well, that's not part of my thing. So again, they may not be the right person for you for the long term.
Now you're talking about values alignment.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah, true.
I believe that all dynamics in relationships can be solved if both parties can come to do this work. Like those dynamics can absolutely be solved, but you still need to have a values alignment, and you might allow a value to be let go of. Or, if I've seen men as an example that haven't valued themselves strongly enough or highly enough, that they put themselves second and their values and their desires second inside of a relationship. And yes, we can undo all of this patterning and the relationship could absolutely work. But then they've hit a values alignment and gone, well, I'm actually not attracted to this. And this doesn't actually align with my values. And I've overlooked that for the sake of staying in connection.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. So what is the dynamic, what that usually like when a high performer is running on empty and at home?
Well, it can be different in all sorts of relationships. I will see reactivity a lot, right? Reactivity and shutdown. So it's either every little tiny thing that they've done wrong is bad, wrong, how dare you, and it's the small things that start to get triggering, or it's shut down. Okay, well, I can't deal with this and I'll just, stay within myself and do my work and not really be present as a general rule. If you want to get really, really specific about it, it'll be the same argument on loop, which isn't actually about that argument. It's about I'm exhausted and I have needs that aren't being met.
Mm. Now you talk about the difference between just managing a pattern and actually clearing it at the root. Can you explain what that looks like in practice? Like how do you do that and clear it at the root?
Yeah. So managing a pattern would look like this. Let's say it's within my team and she comes to me all of the time and it triggers me. And I go, okay, well, I'm a really good leader. So I'm going to like let that be triggering and I'm going to operate in the way that I know that I should. And I'm going to stay calm and I'm going to say the right things and I'm going to do the right things. And then I'm going to be really dysregulated for the rest of the day or the week because I'm managing this pattern.
Hmm.
Actually resolving it at the root is going to find what, like, so let's say that trigger happens and okay, that's like a punch in my gut and I've got adrenaline rushing to my brain and I can't believe this is happening right now and oh my god, she's the worst, this always happens. Actually going to where that sits in the body and finding where it first came from and expressing all of the emotions around it, and until that sensation is no longer there. So there might be multiple facets that happened in this scenario. It could be,
Hmm.
the rescuing pattern that I had as the example. It could be that I need to be seen and heard. It could be that I feel like everyone always does wrong by me or no one ever supports me or whatever that is, until that is cleared from the body. And then it looks like same scenario happens and you're like, okay, cool. Let's work with that. And there is no, so you don't get the adrenaline, the dysregulation, and you can change either the like this entire scenario of how it's operating. So, as an example, right now, I changed the entire structure of my team because I was like, well, actually, I've been letting this play out because of an old pattern that I'm running. And every time it comes up, I have this experience in my body and I'm really dysregulated and stressed and I'm not sleeping very well because of it. And then clearing it is like, yeah, you don't get away with that. That's not how it works. Here's my boundaries. I don't really care how you respond,
Hmm.
not a me problem. And now I'm going to do a restructure and that's cool. Now I'm winning.
Hmm.
Effortless.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And and for you, like with making that change, how does it how does it feel to initially, like, is it easy for you, or do you have to kind of like, is it a bit of work to do that?
It depends on what it is. So you were talking about abandonment before, right? I probably spent 2 or 3 months on abandonment wounds because they were embedded deep. And that was horrific. It was a horrific experience to undo that. And then, now it's like these little things that are kind of in my way of growth or in my way inside of the relationship or not really landing me in perfect presence. It might be like a session or two around it. And there might be some uncomfortability as the change happens. And there's a bit of an identity that has to leave there. Emotions come out, it feels uncomfortable, and then you take the action. And I think that's a practice that you can get very good at. And so initially,
Hmm.
it might feel like all change, very uncomfortable. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily a hard thing to do, it just feels very uncomfortable.
Yeah. For me, it was back in 2024 where I had this big moment of like everything, all of that abandonment stuff coming up. And it was 12 weeks for me of sitting in that discomfort and really just feeling through every emotion and feeling and just, yeah. And I wouldn't say that I was completely healed from that, but, like probably about 6 months later, there were still things popping up. But over the last couple of years, I've yeah,
That's
you've
amazing.
worked through you work through it, yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I had a coach in Australia, I don't know if you know him, but, Matt Lavaz
Yeah.
used to be at the coaching institute. So Matt, I was talking to him and he said, "Dude, bro, you've already got the awareness, just do the work." And I'm like, "Yeah, man." I've always been like that, though. I always have the awareness, and then I guess sometimes you'll do the work and sometimes it's the fear that stops you, right? But, I think lately I'm just learning to walk alongside fear. I see fear as a companion, and it's like I'm just going, well, you know what? I'm just gonna do it anyway and see what happens. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen, right?
Question, what's the worst thing that can happen? And also, what's the best thing that can happen? Yeah.
Yeah, I've sung in front of thousands of people. I've come on these podcasts every week, but I found it quite difficult to get in front of a camera and just talk
Is that
on
right?
LinkedIn or Facebook. And I went through an exercise back in 2022 where I said, well, okay, January 1st to the 31st of January 2023, I'm going to show up every day on my Facebook and I'm just going to talk. Right? I ended up doing that, and I started off with like 5 minutes and then ended up at the last day at 50 minutes unprepared. LinkedIn being a more professional space, of course, you got past managers and everything. And then there's that fear that pops up. But it's like I had to shift my identity and go, well, I'm not tied to any of those organizations anymore or those people. I'm now my own CEO and a founder of my business. So, why should I feel scared? And yeah, so I've been gently pushing myself to get out there and do it.
So when I see that, and I see that a lot, it's, generally a wound around being seen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And there's
yeah,
another interesting thing that happens actually with advertising and like Facebook ads and Instagram ads and things like that. When that wound is still running, you can do the ads and they won't work because somewhere energetically you're like, I actually don't want to be seen. I actually don't want this. This is actually terrifying. You run it, but you kind of like, and when you can fully own the being seen and you can clear that, everything starts to land really well and it becomes effortless.
yeah.
You don't have to force it anymore.
Yeah, and that's it. Like often you're just trying to like what you when you're doing those videos, you might have a script and you're just talking through a script, right? Whereas if you just show up as yourself and just go, "Hey guys," and that's what I did this morning. Is I just went, "Hey, last week I had a client and I did this clarity assessment and this is what this person said, and today I've just done another one and this is what this person said, and I really want to reach out to small medium businesses and." It actually felt so natural, and I was like, I didn't feel any resistance.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is, often you'll see things pop up on social media, and people lately are saying they want to see more authenticity and they want to see people show up. But often those things are actually coming up so that it's going to trigger you, so that you can then start to work through that and heal through that, right? So I see those as kind of like synchronicities of speaking to me that it's time to start doing it and not, you know,
Well, it's funny because the authenticity piece is probably the most terrifying thing for people, because if you show up exactly as you are and then people don't like that, you've got nothing left. And so people will always have this little bit of not quite authentic part of themselves. So it's like, well, I haven't really brought all of myself. I haven't really tried as hard as I could try. I haven't really been exactly who I am. And then I've actually got myself safe. I don't know if anyone likes that or not, so I'm kind of safe to really be exactly who you are. It is the most terrifying thing for people.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it can be absolutely. Yeah, I guess you just got to keep practicing it
And
and
realize you
pushing
don't die.
yourself. Yeah, and if you, I guess if you have this mindset of like no one's actually judging you, everyone else is probably feeling the same way as well. And you just show up as yourself, and
Yeah,
then you're fine.
it's that, except
Yeah,
that judgment piece will run so deep that you could say that all day long and you're like, "Still can't, they're gonna
yeah,
judge me?"
yeah,
And it's a
yeah,
two-sided coin. Like, if you're wondering if you have a problem with thinking people might judge you, notice how much you judge other people,
yeah. True.
because
Exactly.
the
Yeah,
level that you're judging other people, like, quietly in your mind, that you don't really tell anyone else about, is likely how much you fear other people judging you.
yeah. Absolutely. I remember I was working in a corporate organization as being just going through a redundancy, and I mean, I was only there for 3 months. I got hired, and then 3 months later, I got let go. But like, I showed up as my authentic self, and of course, the leadership didn't like that, and I spoke my truth, and I was just speaking what was real for me. And this manager pulled me aside, and she goes, "You got to stop worrying about your team and this and that, and you got to worry about what you want." And I said, "Excuse me, what I want goes far beyond this organization." But I said, "I'm not going to give up on my team. Those people are like family to me. And so you're telling me, you are a manager and you're telling me to effectively divide a team, And I just let it. And I don't think she was expecting anyone to come up against her and actually challenge her in that way. So it was quite an interesting situation. But I was like, well, I'm going anyway, so I don't really care.
Yeah. There's some pretty big problems in the corporate world, and if I think there's a lot of leadership training that goes on in there that's very fluffy and doesn't actually allow
Oh,
people to understand what's going on here. I mean, I got into corporate at 21 and I bounced out so quickly because I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get up at 5, I'm going to get my job done by 2, I'm going to go be an athlete, and I was number 1 in the country in the sales, and like the management was mad at me all the time. And that's like their shadow of not being able to have their own life in the way that their needs, like to have their own needs met. And so they're angry at me for having my needs met and still winning. And it's like, how can I be in trouble for this? I can teach you how to do this. What's going on here? Like, this is horrendous.
yeah. Yeah, I had a manager at my level say to me, um, can you stop being so good because you're showing us up?
Yeah.
And I was like, I was like, that's not my problem. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, I'm not gonna, I'm not going to stop engaging with the business and the way I do because they love me for what I do and how I show up. But if you can't show up, with
So,
your
yeah.
authentic self, then
So there's
that's your
like
problem.
amount of like all this talk we're talking about in relationships with projection and all of this wounds coming out. It happens through all businesses throughout the whole, especially in big executive teams and stuff like that. CEOs are out there projecting all of their unmet needs out into their business, and it needs to be solved
Yeah, it does. It does need to be solved, absolutely. And this is why this podcast exists because it's be the change in the world that you want to see. Show up as the person that you want others to be like. And if you be a role model, then people will model off you. Because the reality is when you're a leader, people look up to you as a role model. So yeah, absolutely. Now, how do you help someone identify a pattern if they don't even know if that you got one?
through feeling. So if that like normally when someone comes to me, their nervous system's pretty fried and we just like there is stuff on the surface straight away. And so it's always driving to the feeling. And you might have something in your life like people always do this. People always do that. I can't get past here. This is not working for me. Why do I feel drained? And so we deal with those scenarios that are a problem and just kind of like, all right, like whatever you show up with. I did one recently around like why do I turn into a brat when I'm in my training sessions with my strength coach? And I was like, let's just see if I can figure that out. And it was like, that's actually what found me the rescuer pattern. And it's just going to the feeling. And the feeling has all the truth. Like our brain's not going to figure it out. We'll make shit up. We'll like do stuff to please the person in front of us. Or maybe it's this and maybe it's that. And whatever story keeps us probably able to keep the pattern alive. When you go to the feeling in the body, that's where all the truth lives. And we can track that. We can hear the words that are coming out of that. We can track the emotions inside of it. We can track back to where it first came from. And that's where we find these patterns that have been running the entire life. There's very often links between that original moment and how this is playing out right now.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people are always in their heads, right? They're always thinking, they're ruminating, they're anxious because they're just constantly in a loop, chatter, 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 chatter. Now, you and I know what it's like to go into your body and actually be with. So, if someone's listening to this and going, well, how the heck do I even do that? What would you say to them?
So the first thing is to notice the simple things. Like, what does it feel like to have your feet touch the floor? What does the sensation of the floor feel like? What is the sensation of where your hands are sitting? What does the fabric on your clothes where your hands are sitting feel like? What is the sensation of the air that's coming in and out of your nose as you breathe feel like? Now you're starting to feel sensation. The more you can do that, the more embodied you start to become. And then you can start to go, well, what does my stomach feel like right now? What does my heart feel like right now? What does my head feel? And then you're starting to actually notice sensation. And that's really, really simple to do.
Hmm.
Like, yes, you can do that on your own. I think it's a really good thing to do. What will normally happen is people will immediately get quite emotional because they haven't been there. They haven't, like, you've got a tense stomach that's full of adrenaline, and now you go to it. It's going to be like, whoa, I do not want to do that. But the more that you can, like, just becoming a little more embodied will make you a little more present.
Yeah. So working with someone like yourself will help get that sort of momentum going and
So the other thing that's necessary is a calm nervous system. So the reason that the work we do works so well is the people are borrowing our very grounded nervous system. So they're co-regulating with us. It's really hard to go to hard feelings when you're that dysregulated and it's that scary to feel these things. So my job is to do so much of this regulation myself and do so much of the work myself that I number one have a very regulated nervous system when I show up, and number two, I don't have any judgments about anything that you say.
right.
Yeah. And now you're
Yeah.
somewhere safe and it's actually you're co-regulating with my nervous system and it's safer to access this stuff.
Yeah. And so you're doing that on one or in group as well?
I do both now. Most of the work is done
Both.
one-on-one. I've just like the our one-on-one clients have been doing group as well for a little while, and I'm just starting to launch it for other people. It's actually really cool because it feels like I'm doing no work because I've got like a whole group of nervous systems in the room that are all co-regulating each other.
It must be an amazing feeling when everyone is co-regulating together and just steady. energy that it would create
Yeah.
would be absolutely amazing.
And there's I mean, if we wanna get really woo-woo about it, what I'm finding is you think about the field of energy and the fabric of the universe and, inside of a community, you have, like, a node of energy and a node of all the different people and all their energies in there. And that even without being next to each other, because we're contained inside of the same container, inside of the same environment, I'm holding that container, people start to hit the same stuff. It's like one person deals with something and then the other person goes, well, that's released from that person's nervous system. I can now release a little bit. And we're all the nervous systems are kind of holding each other and the same things start to surface together. And then if someone tries to come into it and they're not willing to get to that place, they'll bounce out.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
higher I can hold this, the faster people will rise up into it.
yeah, because you are then becoming one consciousness, right?
Exactly that.
And, like our body, our energy is not just inside our body, it's also outside of our body as well. So when you've got people, at a particular distance, you've got all those energies kind of like intertwining and becoming one. Yeah, like I said, one consciousness. Yeah. And just, by the way, you can be as woo woo as you want. We love woo woo on this podcast.
I try not to go there too much because I'm like, I get really mad at some of the woo-woo stuff sometimes because I find that there's a lot of bypass and escapism that goes on in it. So I'm towing the line.
There is, but I think if you can, like you said, if you can do the important stuff, like we're getting into your body and this and that, then the woo woo stuff complements it. It's not, yeah, it's not good or bad. It's just if you go too much into one thing, then it's got to be mind, body, soul.
Yeah.
So everything, right? So most people think mindset is just about thoughts, but you focus heavily on the nervous system. What role does physiology play keeping us stuck in these old patterns or old loops?
Oh, this is a rabbit hole. So there is some really cool science coming out around this, but there's stuff like we have this mind, but we also have a gut mind
And a heart mind.
and a heart mind. And they're even showing now that there is in neuroimmunology, the immune cells in the gut sometimes send signals to the brain, and sometimes the immune cells in the brain send signals to the gut. So, like, this is why gut health is really important. And it's that they've actually proven it now that that's not necessarily the mind sending the signals that are changing the gut's behavior. There's actually immune cells that are creating things from the bottom. And then you've got, like, you watch someone in an aerial fascia release, as an example. So I'm an aerial fascia therapist as well. And you release someone's fascia in their hips where they have physiologically stored trauma, and you pull them out of it and they're in fetal position. You're processing very, very, very big trauma. It's stored in our tissues. It's stored in our fat cells. So one of the things that I work a lot with is women losing weight. And as we start to let go of it, the trauma starts to release. So there's toxins
Mm,
kind of stuck in there. So, you look at, I can't lose the weight no matter what I do. How are you trying to protect yourself from the world? Yeah. So there's all of this stuff with the thyroid. Like, the thyroid tends to be the last hurrah of the body going, I've had enough. You've held on to way too much. Now this is going to go. And you start undoing this stuff and it gets better. And there seems to be, I can't quite explain the science because it's very new. But there are signals in our body that are telling our body what to do. There's little parts that are telling our body what to do. And when you release a story or release a pattern, it changes its messaging. And now it will message to be something completely different. So we have to actually take care of it from the body's perspective. We can't, because the mind will tell lies and do all sorts of things. The body holds what is real,
but it keeps the score.
keeps the score. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you're right. Everything, cells have their own, because mind goes all through our body. Not our brain is just the thinking machine, but
Yeah.
the mind itself is all through the body, through our veins, through the muscles, through everything. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've been like a little pot belly thing. Yeah, I've been like, how can I get rid of this thing? But
It's all
it
it's
could
all
be
the
that.
things, right, though? Like, inside of what we do, I'm teaching people about movement, about food, about these
Yeah,
therapies because they still do matter. Like, you do cold therapy 4 times a week and you're training the same neural pathways that it takes to stay calm in an uncomfortable emotional response, because you're choosing the hard and then choosing to stay there, which is exactly the same as being triggered and sitting with it and staying there instead of avoiding, abandoning, reacting. So these things are very helpful, and if we can do it all together, we get a much faster result.
Yeah.
You can't eat a bunch of sugar and expect to be regulated.
Yeah. How does a locked nervous system show up in a boardroom or conversation?
Reactivity, control, needing to be right. Um, they're probably the main things. It's like I have to have my own way. You're absolutely wrong. I'm getting reactive over this, or the complete shutdown of I'll just let people do whatever they want to do, not speaking the truth of what you feel like is right, but just agreeing with everyone for the sake of agreeing with everyone. Um, you know, I have an example of a CEO who wanted to go be a part of his own business and was scared to tell everyone. So he was micromanaging everything from behind the scenes and trying to make sure all the parts were in place. And I'll put this here and I'll put that there and I'll make sure that person's doing that. So if I leave, they'll all be okay. And that came from a trauma that happened very, very early on in his life, and where he didn't ask what everyone else needed, and it was trying to control to keep everyone safe, to keep everyone happy, because he was the one causing all of the problems. And when we undid
Mm,
that, just rocked up and went, "Hey guys, I'm probably going to go and do this. How can I help you get what you guys need?" And they were like, "Oh, that's like, happy for you, sad for me, but let's figure it out." And the whole trajectory of everything changes, and those relationships get saved.
yeah, exactly. I think that happened to me back in 2023. I was uh, a GM that I was working with, and we were butting heads at times. But then I realized that I was just trying to control stuff. A friend of mine, a fellow coach in Australia, said to me, she said, "Well, how can you approach this differently?" And then I just went into that meeting going, "How can I help?" And you should have seen the look on his face. He was like, "Wow."
Yeah.
And it completely changed. And, because it was my last day, probably a few weeks before, I actually took him into a room and blasted him for an hour because of all the things that he'd been doing um, to break the relationships that I'd been building in the business. And in the end, he turned around and said, "Yeah, you're right." And not that I had to be right or wrong, but it was just like I had to speak up and speak my truth. But then as I was leaving, I had to leave in a way that was constructive and not just, yeah, about helping rather than, um, and I remember he was like, "Oh, you got to do this handover and you got to fill out these documents." I said, "I'm going to do one better. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a meeting with each person. I'm going to take them through it. I'm going to record it, and it's going to be on a SharePoint site on the link on the video, and all the information's there. If you need to contact me, there's my number." And they turned around and they just went, "Wow." I said, because we used to do this thing on a Friday. "What was your highlight of your week?" And he turns around and says, "Anthony's handover was the highlight of my week."
Yeah.
Because I was like, I wasn't going to go bitter or anything. I was just going to I'm actually going to, help these people and set them up for success. Yeah. So it worked out really well. Now,
I
what you
love that
just,
because you're talking to actually having collaboration and community as a business model.
yeah, 100%. And, as I've mentioned to you as well, this is not a one-off podcast episode. This is a relationship that I'm building with you because I want to bring you back and do more stuff with you because effectively I'm creating a movement, but within this movement, there are many different facets. I'm about to launch an academy where I want each guest to be able to contribute a small course or something like that. And also, my plan is to write a book for each season of this podcast, and each episode will become a chapter in the book.
Cool.
Right?
AI generated?
So AI might help me because could you imagine 200 and something episodes and
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm imagining that you've already got this set up in your system and you're like, "Book button."
well, no, not quite. I was thinking about that this morning though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was talking to another guest and this morning, and he's written a book, and I was like, I explained to him what I was going to do. I said, and in the back of my mind, I was thinking, okay, how can I keep it authentic, but at the same time get AI to help me write this, you know? And then I'm going to have to go and find all the transcripts and everything from the first season, which I don't even know if I have got them, but we'll see. And I guess what I was going to say is that because of the way people show up and the conversations and all the stuff that's happening. I guess because of that, people feel like they're hitting a ceiling, you know, and can't seem to break through. And so, what for those who are listening and they're feeling like they can't break through, what is your advice to them?
Come and see me.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Ceilings are always something that your system can't go past. It's not that you don't know how. It can be things like, if I become that successful, will I lose everyone? Will I lose connection and will I lose love? That's been a really big one for me. It's, if I get past this ceiling, I'll have to take on all of this responsibility and that feels terrifying and I hate responsibility. It's like it's old patterns that are trying to keep you safe. So it's not a self sabotage, it is a self protection. Any ceiling is there to protect you from what your system, your nervous system deems as dangerous. So we just need to find what that thing is and undo it, and off you go.
Yeah, exactly, and that keeps you in your comfort zone. And as Rob Dial from the Mindset Mentor says, your dreams die in your comfort zone. So
And this is a
start.
problem with high performers because it looks like they're sitting outside of a comfort zone because they're doing things bigger than other people. And so they've got this story going, I'm outside of my comfort zone. Look, I'm running this business. I'm doing these things. It's like, but is it outside of your comfort zone? Are you actually uncomfortable right now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Now, before we go into quickfire questions, I'd love for you to share with us the Resurrection program and tell us what it is and how it transforms people in 90 days. What does that transition look like and feel like for people, for leaders who have been stuck for years?
Yeah, so it's the initial part of it is 90 days, and we've just started running 12-month programs for leaders and executives and business owners as well, because we all rock up with so much stuff. We have so many places we want to go. But it looks like one-on-one integration sessions. So it's the deepest work that I know is available, going into these stories, into these patterns, into these feelings, and undoing it surgically. So it's not like, let's just see what shows up today. It's like, here's your problems. Let's get a scalpel, let's undo it so that you can integrate that into your life over the next week. Inside of that, we have these group ones that we're running now. So you've got community. We have a beautiful community, so you can connect with other people doing the same thing. And we support you with food and strength training and anything else that you need inside of leadership or relationships. You got one-on-one support like between those sessions as well from all of our coaches. And what generally happens is a breakdown of the old identities and a rebuilding of the new identities so that is solid and you now are comfortable and sovereign to be with yourself. So you can actually go out into the world after that and are safe to do this without endless therapy and out endless coaching because you know how to be with yourself and listen to yourself.
Could you give us an example of a success story and how, someone transitioned through this and how they broke out and where what's happened?
Yeah. Let me give you Matt. So he came to me at the brink of divorce, and he'd been a business owner for 22 years and done all these amazing things in his life. Had been very wealthy, and was at this point of like, I've got no money. My relationship is like we're living in separate houses, and over that time, rebuilt his self worth, and we rebuilt his power within himself, and we rebuilt the I can trust myself and I own my desires and I own my leadership. And he became so calm and regulated that the storms could just go in front of him and just be like, okay, this is what it is. Now, the relationship didn't survive. And that's actually okay. Like he got to there and went, oh, like I have let myself be walked over for my
Mm,
entire life. I've never been by myself. I've latched to connection for the sake of connection. And I've never known truly who I am on my own, what I truly desire and what I truly want. And so now he's standing, it's freaking beautiful actually. He's standing in this place where he's like, I know what I want. I know what I desire. I know what I'm worth. I'll never let anyone walk all over me again. Like all these opportunities started landing in his life because he could actually receive without pushing it away.
mm.
All of these other problems that were in the outside of his life that were kind of niggling just disappeared in weeks after he finished. It's one of my favorite stories, actually. And I can't wait to see what the next few years of his life looks like. And we have so many of those stories that sound exactly the same.
Awesome. Have you got how can people find you and what do you got on offer?
So I do have a podcast, so you can go to Into the Jungle podcast. There's all of the stories there. My website is thejungle.net.au. And if you want to just go straight into one of the funnels to watch some videos and get a consult, then integrated AM.
Okay. So just go to the jungle and you'll be fine.
You go to the jungle.
Welcome to the jungle. Is that
Exactly
your theme
that.
song?
It's massive big neon sign when you walk into our clinic.
Do you play the song as well?
No, I don't play this song.
No. No, Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses.
If I could hire Guns N' Roses here playing it live when people walked in, I would do that.
Oh yeah, that could be interesting, wouldn't it? Alrighty. Well, what we'll do is we'll put those links into the show notes, but also you'll get a dedicated page on the Champion Mindset Collective Hub website. It's the website, but I call it's the hub because there's so much more than a website. So if you're watching this or listening to this, you'll find an article, you'll find the videos, and you'll also find a practical guide that it is AI generated, but it's actually from the transcript of this podcast. So it goes deeper and it pulls out all the cool stuff that people can download and start applying in their life to a point now. And then you can get in touch with Hannah and the team. So yeah, now we're going to kick into the quick fire round, which is 6 very quick questions. You can answer these in a single word or a short sentence. And the first question for you is, are you ready? How do you define success, and has that definition evolved for you over time?
Yeah. Now it means how I feel in my body and what my relationships look like. And it used to mean how many accolades can I show to the world on Instagram.
Nice. Who's been your greatest inspiration and why?
Look, I sat with this all day today when you put that in the email, and I am actually going to say my partner, because I have never seen such fast growth in all of my life and such relentlessness on becoming the best version of themselves. Like, it blows me out of the park.
That's awesome. Yeah. The interview I had this morning, the gentleman said myself. It's interesting hearing these answers.
Yeah.
What is something that you believe that others may disagree with?
Look, I think that most personal development, most coaching, and most therapy are actually keeping people stuck.
Yeah, there's truth in that. I think what you're doing is amazing, and it's all about integration. Yeah, and I learned a little bit about spiral dynamics,
Yeah.
and so I understand what you're talking about. If you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
Pushing hard isn't strength. It's actually all of your fears, and just stop.
Yeah. Something I read yesterday is that when the universe when you're aligned and things are happening in the universe, often things will be slow for us. Things start to slow down and they might even be on pause because there's a whole lot of stuff happening, but we've got to catch up with what's
Oh,
happening.
yeah. 3D world is
So
most.
yeah, so again, if you're watching this and listening to this, just because you're going through a slowness doesn't mean things are stopping. It means that you've just got to catch up with what's ahead. What is one message that you like to share with the world?
You are not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You've just got patterns, and patterns can change.
Yeah, and we are humans. We are pattern recognition machine. We just got to learn to recognize those patterns. And what does it mean to you to be a champion? And you are a true champion.
Multiple times.
And yeah, so what does it mean to you to be a champion and have a champion mindset?
To never stop, like, always get back up. Doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, you get back up. That's how you win things.
That's right. Never give up and never slow down. And my motto is you never retire until you're dead in the ground.
Yeah.
So keep going.
Yeah. There's definitely something massive about that. I mean, I have been told maybe 15 times to shut down this business. And I'm like,
Keep going.
watch this, it'll be fine. And it's, the difference between the ones that fail and the ones that do well is like, you just don't stop. If
Yeah,
you
look,
you keep going.
I know so many people, and I've got a friend in Australia, Mario, who's a podcaster, and he was told, he's got the Life is a Battlefield podcast, and he was told by so many people that he was crazy running a podcast, and he went from zero to $1 million, and stuff. I believe that I like what Steve Harvey says. He says that God, the divine universe, gave you a vision, and other people will not understand that vision because that vision was never meant for them. It was only meant for you. So if you're being given a vision to achieve something, to be something, create something, then it doesn't matter what other people say. Well, all that matters is that if it resonates with you and it aligns with who you want to be, and that's your heart's desire, go for gold. Just never give up. Just keep following it.
And
And
I
I've had
think
people say to me, oh, people said to me, "Oh, this podcast is just a side thing, right?" I'm like, "No, it's not."
I think it can be a lonely place as well when you're that committed to something that no one else understands, when it's outside of status quo, when it's things that other people aren't doing. It can be a lonely thing, and I think that that's just needs to be an acceptance. I struggle with it all the time, and it's like I just have to accept that's what it is.
Do you know what? I've never struggled with it because for me personally, I have spent more time alone in my life than I have in relationships or whatever. But even in this journey of entrepreneurship, as lonely as it is, I think it's exciting. I don't know. I mean, I kind of when my brain kind of works probably a little bit like Elon Musk, because I've got huge, massive dreams that people can't. Every time I talk to someone, they go, "I feel overwhelmed after the conversation," because they just can't grasp onto it.
And I think that's what the thing that becomes lonely is it's like you will never see and understand me for exactly what I'm talking about. You kind of go, "Yeah, that's amazing. I don't really know what's going on. I don't really get it." And that's that little piece that's like, "Wow, I just wish someone could really get this part of it and care as much as I care and be sitting here being really excited about the like littlest things along the way." And no one's ever going to understand what you're trying to build as much as you.
No, absolutely. No one will. Hannah, this has been amazing. I've really enjoyed this chat. It's got me thinking about how much we can try and fix things in our head, which never work, because you just create more chaos in there. And the answer is actually, like you said, sitting in our bodies. It's doing the internal work and integrating all of that into your life. My day today is that just the mindset work itself is not going to help you. But if your nervous system is still stuck in that old loop, so we've got to make sure that we get ourselves out of that old pattern, the loop, the way of thinking and being. And you just can't think your way out of into a new version of yourself. So if you're watching, listening to this, yeah, the mindset is good, but also you've got to do the work as well. Thank you in coming and sharing what you've shared with us today. And for anyone listening to this, if this has hit home for you, if this resonated with you, then subscribe and also share it with someone who can benefit from this. Someone may be struggling in your life and your um, circle. Share it with them. There is hope. There is people out there like Hannah who can help you. So get in touch. And the details, as I mentioned before, will be on the episode page on the Champion Mindset Collective hub, and also in the show notes. You can go to that episode page. You can view the videos, everything in one place. And also there's an academy. I'm starting an academy in a couple of weeks' time. There'll be a link for you to register and become a founding member, and there'll be some courses around the first lot of courses around redundancy reset, or the champion reset, on what happens next, and then there's also some AI courses coming as well. Even a course on how to deal with dyslexia, which will be in the future. Yeah, so this is where a community of coaches and professionals like Hannah can also, contribute their mini courses or free courses that can help people as well. Yeah. So lastly, I just want to say you are loved, you're worthy, champion your life, champion your greatness, and have an amazing day.
Awesome.